Shalom, I'm BJ Walters, and thanks for joining me this evening for this episode on the Anchored in Messiah program right here on HRN Revive TV. Today's lesson is titled, Don't Get Accustomed to the Noise. I want to begin this episode by building a launching pad or an introduction for this teaching, and this will be part one, as there will probably be a part two. So, as you already know, the Bible is documented with over 100 verses about the second coming of the Messiah. And just like many of us out there, I've heard it, you've heard it, and most of the world has heard it. Believers and unbelievers alike have heard that Jesus Christ, Yeshua the Messiah, is returning. But as of now, he hasn't returned. And here we are more than 2,000 years after his death, burial, and resurrection, and we are still awaiting the return of the Messiah. So, does this mean that the Word of God is a lie since this prophetic event hasn't occurred yet? Absolutely not. The answer to that claim simply would be that Yeshua's time isn't completed. So, with that being said, there are many prophetic factors to factor in that would lead us up to his return, and obviously, these events have not yet been fulfilled at this time, but soon enough, they will be fulfilled. So while we wait for Messiah's return, we cannot acclimate to the world or become accustomed to the noise. So I pray by his grace, we will not grow weary in doing good. In Matthew chapter 24 and verses 12, Yeshua said, "And because lawlessness will be increased, the love of many will grow cold." One particular event that we can correlate with the Messiah's return is the Golden Calf Party, as I like to call it. We cannot be like the Golden Calf Party or neither participate in their behavior or character. So in Exodus chapter 32, and we'll begin in verses 1, and it reads, "When the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, the people gathered themselves together to Aaron and said to him, 'Up, make us gods who shall go before us.'" So at this point, Yahweh informs Moses to get down from the mountain because the people have corrupted themselves. Now jump into verse 17, and it reads, "When Joshua heard the noise of the people as they shouted, he said to Moses, 'There was a noise of war in the camp.' But he said, 'It is not the sound of shouting for victory or the sound of cry of defeat, but the sound of singing that I hear.'" So in this chapter, we see where the Israelites made this golden calf a god, all because the people of Israel's patience had grown weary while waiting on Moses to return from Mount Sinai. In their own opinion, they thought that Moses was away longer than they expected or thought he should be, and they began to believe that Moses would never return, so they decided to worship in idolatry. And we can learn a lot from this story and can make it applicable in so many ways in our lives. One thing that stuck out to me in this story was what Joshua said. Joshua said something profound in this chapter, and the text said that Joshua heard this noise coming from the camp and that the people were shouting. And Moses then replied to Joshua, "It is not the noise of the shout of victory, or neither the noise of the cry of defeat, but the sound of singing I hear." So what can we glean from this? We can glean so much, but one thing we can learn is that if we're not careful, we can sing and dance to an ungodly tune or an ungodly noise that leads to idolatry and golden calf type worship. And if we're not too careful, our ears will get accustomed to the noise of an ungodly sound and we'll start dancing to a different beat. Presently, we can see that the church at large is falling by the wayside, and the enemy is robbing them and so many more of their joy, while at the same time, the body of Messiah is seeing major distractions as many believers are becoming less focused or being conquered by a lack of spiritual desire. Who would do such a thing like this? The enemy himself. The church at large is doing its own thing. The church has become complacent, comfortable, and has gotten accustomed and acclimated to the cares of this world. They have gotten accustomed to the noise of the enemy and are focused less on the coming of the Messiah. To put it plain and simple, people, the church, are growing weary and are being deceived by the enemy in these last days. And if it can happen to perfect people in a garden, then it can happen to you and I. So we have to guard and protect our hearts. So let me read to you Psalms chapter 55, beginning, I think, in verse 1. And it reads, "Give ear to my prayer, O God, and hide not yourself from my plea for mercy. Attend to me and answer me. I am restless in my complaint, and I moan because of the noise of the enemy." And in verse 3 it reads, "I am restless in my complaint because of the noise of the enemy." So I repeated that just to bring some emphasis to it. And I believe many of you will agree that the maker of noise, who fell like lightning that day from heaven, made his way in to the garden and whispered a noise into the heart of man. And he spoke it with the loudest whisper. And that whisper of noise still echoes today in the heart of man. And we need to be aware that we can be easily overcome with the maker of noise. And the maker of noise is the enemy, Hasatan himself. And at the same time, we can also get accustomed to that noise of this world if we're not too careful. My noise and your noise may be two different kind of noise that mine and your neighbor may be hearing or experiencing. But whatever noise they may be hearing or whatever noise it may bring to them, it's bringing distraction or complacency or less focus or less desirable heart to pray and to seek out the Father's will for their life, or they don't have those desires like they used to have for spiritual matters. Like I said, that noise may be different. Your noise may be different than my noise, but it still comes from the maker of the noise, the enemy himself. So if I can encourage us today, please let us not get accustomed to the noise and become acclimated to the noise that surrounds us. Our ears can become deafened. We begin to become blinded, and we just kind of get acclimated to the things that are going on in our life and forget about the restoration of all things, if I can put it that way. So in today's troublesome world we're living in, the noise will continue to get louder and louder and louder, but we have to drown out the noise the enemy is whispering in our ear with the word of Yahweh. Have you ever noticed that it can be easier to drown out the voice of the Spirit, but we can't drown out the voice of the enemy? Just something to think about. So as I bring this session to a close, keep this in mind. While we wait on the return of the Messiah, let us not get too impatient to the point where we play dangerously and grow weary in doing good. And lastly, we cannot get accustomed to the noise and become acclimated to an ungodly sound that leads to golden calf worship, because when we do, we then are becoming members of the golden calf party, and that's living life dangerously on the edge. Until next time, shalom.